Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as we divide, move, and plant some perennials. So let's go. Here we are, it's the end of August. It's a perfect time for me to be dividing and moving perennials around my yard. I had a question recently from one of you that asked, when is the right time to be doing a job like this? And my answer is, it really depends on where you live. I live in a northern climate and our temperatures are starting to drop fast, which is why you see me wearing a sweatshirt right now. So our daytime temperatures are ranging somewhere between 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and at nighttime, we're dipping actually down into the mid 40 to 50 degree range. So it's a very good time for me to be dividing my perennials. I want to do it now because I want those roots to have plenty of time to establish themselves before the cold weather arrives. However, if you live in an area where you're still in the 90 to 100 degree Fahrenheit range, you may need to wait a little bit longer. It really depends on your climate and your location. I will say it's quite possible to divide and move plants around even in those type of extreme temperatures. The key is make sure you're giving those plants plenty of water for days after you do that type of job. This flower bed is located on the south side of my house, and I did want to point out this one beautiful plant that's currently blooming here at the end of August, and it's called Joe Pye weed. There are a lot of different things I want to do in this flower bed, but we're going to stay focused today. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves. The first thing is right here, we have a number of hosta. They've only been here for a few years. I tucked them in this space because right above them is a small leaf rhododendron. When it bloomed during the spring months, it looked so pretty. What I didn't like about it though was that it was quite large for this space. So after it was done blooming, I came in and I pruned it back really hard. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this fills in the space without it being so big. But I don't enjoy looking at the hosta at the base. They're not looking so bad considering this bed is full sun. But nevertheless, I don't want to have hosta at the base of the rhododendron anymore. I'd rather put the hosta in a shadier area since this bed is full sun. So the first step is we're going to go ahead and be removing the hosta plants from this space. Usually hosta thrive in shady locations, and considering we had a very hot, very dry, very humid summer, I feel like these hosta plants actually look pretty good. They're not as sun-scorched as you would think hosta would become in a situation like that. But if you have a plant in your landscape and you're not happy with it or you don't like where the placement is, you don't want to live with that. You want to make sure that you're changing things up so that when you walk around your flower beds, you're happy, you love looking at that particular space. And this summer, every time I walked by this space, I like the look of the hosta, but I just don't like the look of the hosta in this space. I don't know what variety of hosta it is, but they're very pretty and I like the look of them. So the plan for today is to dig them all up. We're going to divide them down and we're just going to move them to another place in my yard. I'm just going to pull away the mulch from the base of the plant because I do have a nice thick layer of mulch that was added in here during the spring months. I was also checking for irrigation lines, and I can see I have an irrigation line right here. So when I dig, I just want to be mindful of that. I don't want to dig too close to it. I'm going to use a large shovel to dig my hosta, and I don't want to dig right at the base of the plant. I want to dig about a few inches away from the base, just so that I don't ruin the roots of my hosta plant. This bed is definitely pretty sandy, which is what you hear while I'm digging. And I can dig on this side as well, just to make it a little bit easier. For being a small hosta plant, it has quite an extensive root system to it. And now let's see if we can pull it out. And I'm just going to take off some of the soil from the roots because I don't want to make a big hole in this area here where we just dug up the hosta out. And then we can just clean this up and put the mulch back. I'm actually excited to be adding this particular hosta to the hosta garden bed that I have right behind me. I have a lot of hosta in that hosta garden, but I don't have many that look like this one. I think this will really complement all the other hosta in that hosta garden. Could I just take this hosta and plant it out there? Absolutely. But seeing that we're going to be digging all the hosta plants today from around the rhododendron, I want to just go through the effort. I want to divide them all down to single hosta plants, and then I want to get them planted out there. And then over a few years, each individual hosta plant will turn into a bigger clump. Even though I have many videos showing my process for dividing hosta plants, I figured I might as well just show you very quickly my process for doing it. If you had a very large hosta plant in your landscape and you wanted to divide it without digging it out, you could come in with that large shovel and just cut right down the middle of your plant, and you could cut it as many times as you want. Just know that when you do it that way, you might be forfeiting some of the leaves, but don't worry about it. Your plant will be just fine. The best time to divide your hosta is either in the early spring or late summer months, but honestly, you can do this job any time of the year. Just make sure you're giving your plants plenty of water. When I dig a plant up like this, I like to look around and see if there's a place where I can make a nice clean division. So right in here, for example, would be a great place to make a division. I like to use a tool like this. This is called a hand pruning saw. The brand is Corona, but a lot of different companies make hand pruning saws like this. You don't have to use this though. You could use something like a knife, or you could even use a reciprocating saw. There are a lot of different ways to accomplish the same task. So I'm going to be careful with my fingers because this is sharp, and I can go ahead and start cutting. A lot of times I like to stop part way and just give it a tug and see if it's going to fall apart for me. And as long as your division has some amount of roots to it, as well as foliage on the top, then that's a very good division. And now I'm just going to move this around and see where I can make my next division. So right in here is a good place for me to cut. Again, I'm going to try to tug it first and see if it falls apart, and it's not. So let's go ahead and cut right in here. And when you're doing this type of job, you're going to have roots that are falling off from the base. You can just pull those right off, like these ones here. And let's see if we can pull this one off from here. So not bad. We just turned this one big plant into 1, 2, 3, 4 individual plants. And these are still nice looking little plants here. They will get bigger over time. So let's go ahead and get one planted out in the hosta garden. But before we do that, I'm just going to remove this spent flower stalk here. The flower is gone, but you can see there's nothing at the end there. So I'm just going to cut right at the base. And here we are at what I call my hosta garden, because you can see it's jam-packed with all sorts of different kinds of hosta. This is one of my favorite places in my yard. And there are a lot of different kinds of hosta in this space. So when you look out here, I want you to notice we really don't have this particular hosta out in here. At least I'm not seeing it. So I'm really excited to be adding it. What I will say though is the hosta that we're going to be adding is smaller. It's smaller than some of these larger hosta. So I want to place them where we can really notice them, where they're not going to get hidden. I really love shopping my yard for plants. There's just so much opportunity to be found when you walk around your yard and you just look for plants that you can divide and move around to other parts of your yard. I'm just using a small hand shovel to do the job because since we've divided the hosta up, the roots are not very extensive. This flower bed has drip irrigation in it, so I'm not adding water into the planting hole. The soil is very wet. If you were doing the same job, you would want to make sure you're adding some water into the planting hole or adding water after you plant your hosta. Just make sure that the roots are beneath soil level and the crown or the base of your hosta plant is at soil level. You don't want to have it planted too deep. And then you can backfill. And then push down and backfill. And since I have mulch here, I'm just going to replace the mulch at the base of the plant. Just by adding that one hosta, I feel like it really adds that much needed pop of color in this garden space. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get these guys planted that we already divided. And then there's more hosta that are at the base of the rhododendron all the way around. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get them dug up, divided, and moved into the hosta garden. It took me about an hour and a half. It might have seemed like a very simple project, but here were some of the challenges that I faced. The first one was I was competing with the roots around the rhododendron. I was also competing with the drip irrigation lines. So I basically had to be careful when I was making my digs. So even though those hosta were not very big, they still were a little bit of a beast to dig out. But the great news is it's done. And who knows what I'll end up putting under here, if anything, in the future. It might be a great place for me to tuck some sort of shade-loving plants as my rhododendron gets larger. But I'm glad that the hosta have been removed. And now let me show you where I put them. I started to survey my hosta garden. And since these hosta are not very big, I knew I wanted to tuck them in the front. But you can see that the front is already really taken. So I put a small piece right here, another one over there, and then I started moving in this direction. And I could be wrong. I feel like this is that same hosta that we have just dug out. It has more of a yellow leaf. So time will tell if it's the same one or not. It might just be because this is definitely more in the shade. I started looking on the sides here, and I was tucking a few in. Like I put one right over here and another one down the way over here. Then I started to look at my overall hosta garden. I got a little overwhelmed because there are a lot of large hosta in here and I love it. But I felt like if I was going to tuck in the hosta in this area, it might get hidden. So I had to do some thinking. So I started walking towards my backyard where it's still very shady. And as I walked, I did tuck in a few other hosta here and there just to give little pops of color. In fact, right in this area here, you can see I tucked one in here, but then I had this basically blank area and I looked at it as opportunity right here. And as much as I know most gardening books or advice will say that you should plant in groups of 3, you shouldn't plant in a line, I always like experimenting with things. And so I just put them in a line right there. I actually love it. I think it looks really pretty there because there was that blank area. There's a lot of different foliage and texture going on, but I just like having the pops of white on the edges of the hosta plant. But then I still had a lot more hosta that I needed to get planted. I started looking at this area here. I love this area, but there is a lot of different shades of green going on in this area. There's not a lot of pops of color, not a lot of white. So I basically made a pattern. Wherever I saw a heuchera or a coral bell, I planted the hosta on either side of it. So for example, you can see right here, we have this heuchera, and on both sides of it, towards the front of it, I put one piece of the hosta. And I continued that pattern all the way down. And I want you to see, in this very shady area, it's pretty. There's a lot of different things happening, but what a difference it makes by adding this hosta with the wide rim, the white colored rim. I do have another hosta that's similar, but the white on the edges is not as thick. It's a little thin strip. I like the thicker strip on the edge. And it's so funny because it ended up being that the very last hosta that I planted in this space was at the very end of this basically pattern that I have going on. And I just love it. I think over time it's going to fill in really nicely. And I'm patient. That's the key. When you have a big space like this, you almost have to be patient, because if I was to go out and buy large established plants to do a pattern like this, it would cost a lot of money. And I can guarantee you in a few years, each of these hosta plants will fill in very nicely. And I can't wait. I think it's just going to look so beautiful. And when you just step back and look at the overall pattern that's happening in this area, I think that it's very pleasing to the eye. The next part of this project is fun. It's actually planting a bunch of sedum. And these are the taller variety of sedum that bloom in the late summer, early fall months. And you know what the best part is? They were free. Thank you to my sister-in-law, Jen, for sharing some of the sedum that she had in her yard so I could use them as part of this project. We'll be planting 3 kinds of sedum. One of them I don't know the name, but 2 of them I do. One is Matrona. I love Matrona because it has a very bright red color stem to it. The other sedum is more common, and I think a lot of you have heard of it before. It's called Autumn Joy sedum. Jen had these sedum in an area of her yard where she didn't really love them, so she said, have at it. And I was so happy to dig them up. I dug them up a few weeks ago, and I knew I wanted to put them in this flower bed. This flower bed is perfect for the sedum because it's a full sun flower bed, which sedum likes. The other thing to know about sedum is they don't like a lot of water. So when we get them planted, I'm just going to make sure that they're not like right next to a drip irrigation line. For today, we're just going to be planting the sedum as is. I have divided sedum before. I've made videos showing the process, and I'll put a link to a video down in the description. So step 1 is just to space them out and see what we think of them. I played with the spacing the best that I could, and that's the beauty of gardening is we can give it time. Nothing has to be set in stone. Nothing has to be perfect. I am happy with where they're going to go for this year, and then we'll just have to wait and see what we think over time. So what I did was I tried to alternate them. I started with the Autumn Joy sedum because we have so many more of those. And then next, I used my feet. I counted 3 feet out. We have Matrona. Counted 3 feet out. We have Autumn Joy. 3 feet out. Well, we have a space there where Matrona should go. And maybe if we can divide Matrona, we can put Matrona there. 3 feet out, Autumn Joy, Matrona, Autumn Joy. And for right now, we're not going to worry about this pot. Let's just start digging. I had temporarily put soil in these pots when I dug them out from Jen's house. So I don't really need the soil. I have a lot of soil already in the ground where we're going to be planting these. So instead of making a mess, I'm just dumping the soil on the tarp here. So I'll just take a little bit of the soil off from the base here. And we're then just going to plant it the way it is, just like this. I have a whole bunch of calendula seedlings. I'm just going to leave them there for now. I also have some peony leaves that are right here. We're just going to ignore those. And we're going to end up planting the sedum in this spot here. So I'm just moving the mulch aside. I'm just going to use a large shovel to dig our hole. In terms of a planting depth, we just want to dig the hole deep enough so the roots are beneath soil level and the crown or the base of the plant is flush with soil level. As I'm digging, I'm not noticing any irrigation line here. The soil is wet, but at least there's not an irrigation line going directly to where the sedum is going to go. And that's a good thing because sedum prefer it actually dry. They don't like it very wet. I'm not going to add any sort of fertilizer in the planting hole. And the reason is sedum actually prefer soil that's not full of a ton of nutrients. They're a great drought tolerant plant. They don't need a lot of water. They also don't need a heavily amended soil full of fertilizer. They're a great plant to have actually, and they're pretty. This time of year, they just look so nice. So I'm just basically backfilling with the soil. I'm pressing down. And I'm making sure I didn't plant it too deep. And then I can go ahead and put the mulch back. This is a very easy plant to propagate. Next spring, I will definitely be coming in and I'll be taking cuttings just from the tips. And I can just strip off the bottom leaves and I can go ahead and just plant each of those cuttings in the soil to make more free plants. Or I could have come in and I could have divided this into smaller pieces if I wanted to. But That's perfect. That's all we had to do for this one plant. Just so we can complete that pattern, we are going to go ahead and borrow from this plant. We might as well just divide it just to get it turned into 2 pieces. So I'm just going to remove the soil from the bottom of it. I can see that I can make a division right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to use my hand pruning saw. And I could also use a reciprocating saw if I wanted to, but let's just go ahead and cut right here. A lot of times you wouldn't want to be dividing a perennial that's currently in bloom, but these are pretty hardy plants. And I feel comfortable doing it this time of year. I normally wouldn't, but in this case where we're working with these plants today, we're just going to get it done. There's all these rules and best practices when it comes to gardening, but the way I look at it is sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. This is not going to kill my plant, and we actually have rain coming within the next hour. So the plant will be totally fine. So I'm just going ahead and putting the one section that we have in this hole that I already dug out. It might be a small little piece, but it's totally fine. That's the name of the game. That's what I'm trying to show you today, is when we start with small pieces like this from divisions or from wherever we got them, give them a year or 2 years and they will fill out to be a nice big plant. And I tell you, there are certain plants that I have in my yard that the pollinators go crazy over. This is one of them. And it's so nice to basically have plants for the pollinators. I really enjoy watching them. In fact, one just landed right here. It didn't want to wait for me. It just wanted to get going on what it needs to do. How exciting is that? We'll just clean up around it. And then I'll show you what everything looks like now that we're done with planting all of the sedum, except for that one pot. I am trying to beat the rain, which is very welcome, by the way. It has been super dry here in New Hampshire, so I welcome the rain anytime. So let's see what we've done here. We have our sedum starting with that one side there, and we have a pattern. It's just a straight line with all the sedum here in place. We can always change things around. In fact, I would love to add some of my perennial mums that I have in other places of my garden into this space. We're going to have to wait until spring for us to do that. But for right now, we can enjoy some beautiful color with the sedum that we just planted in here. When it comes to the remaining sedum that we have in this pot, I have a space on the other side of my house where I can tuck this in. I also have the same sedum, I'm almost sure it's the same one, that I can also tuck on the other side of the house. So that will be part of a different project. You can see the line of sedum that we just planted. In this same flower bed, there's one last task or chore that I want us to tackle together. And it has to do with a very beautiful plant that's called Eryngium or sea holly. It has gone by and you can see that it's starting to set seed. I have videos showing my process on how to collect the seed of sea holly. And I also have videos showing my process on how to winter sow sea holly. There are a lot of different kinds of sea holly out there. I'll put links to those videos down below. But for today, we are going to cut back these spent blooms. The reason is I don't want this plant to go to seed in this flower bed. I made the mistake of letting it do that before, and I ended up with a ton of seedlings at the base of this plant, which I really don't want in this flower bed. So let's go ahead and deadhead or prune or cut back the sea holly plant. We're just going to follow the flower stalk all the way down to the base, and we can go ahead and just cut with a pair of hand pruners. Don't get me wrong, I love this plant. I just don't love it that much that I want to have hundreds and hundreds of seedlings growing in this flower bed. But if this was a wild area, by all means. But this area is my side walkway bed. It's a little more formal, and for that reason, I don't want to have that many seedlings. Sea holly has a very deep taproot. It makes it difficult to dig out and move around the yard. And I can assure you, I will still end up with a ton of little baby plants that will crop up next year. Why? Because I waited a little too long to cut these back. In fact, I can tell as I'm cutting them back, I have seeds dropping everywhere. You can't win them all, my friends. You can't win them all, but we can win the battle somewhat by cutting these back now and not waiting any longer. The good news is that I have a backyard plant nursery where I sell plants, and people really love this plant, so it will sell well for me when I dig them up. I have a few more to cut over here, as well as here, as well as there. So let me finish this job because the rain has started. We're in between rain showers, and there are a number of things that I just want to show you right now that make me happy. See that little puddle there? That means we had rain. We've been in such a drought, that little amount of water makes me happy. This little caterpillar on my milkweed, I did have 3 of them, so they're around somewhere. That will eventually become a monarch butterfly, and that makes me happy. All of the pollinators that I've been seeing on my Joe Pye weed lately, that definitely makes me smile. The fact that the sea holly has now been cut down so that it doesn't self-seed itself all over this flower bed definitely makes me happy. The one thing that doesn't make me happy is all the sea holly that seeded itself all around the rocks here, because they are going to be a beast to remove because of their tap roots, and they're right next to this rock. And I literally have the sea holly all around this bed. So when it comes to digging them out, that will be an interesting project. What we're going to do is we're going to start that project. We definitely won't complete this project together, but I just wanted to show you what I'm dealing with. So if you have sea holly in your yard, just beware that if it goes to seed, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of little baby plants. And like I said earlier, it might not be a bad thing depending on where you have it, but I literally have them all around this rock. So let's go ahead and get a few dug up together. When they're small little plants like this here, it's not so bad because their roots are not very deep. It's the bigger, larger plants that I have right next to the rocks. Those ones are going to be a little more difficult. One thing I want to share when it comes to sea holly is when you dig up a very deep taproot, if part of the root breaks, the plant should be fine. It'll be a little stressed, but it will be fine. As long as you get some part of that root, just don't worry about it, get the plant planted. But together we're going to tackle some of the little baby ones over here. And this is going to be an ongoing project. It's not something that is feasible for me to do in one day. It's not even fun for me to want to do in one day. But I think it's feasible for me to say, I'm going to pot up X amount of sea holly per day. And whatever that number is, I'm not sure. Maybe it's 5. Maybe together you and I will dig up 5 sea holly today. I can do 5 sea holly tomorrow, and you get the point, until I finally dug them all out of this area, because I really want to have this sea holly in another flower bed, my long border. I don't need all of them though. This is a popular seller. I can pot them up and I can definitely sell them. So moving the mulch aside, because they're small little seedlings, I'm going to use my hand shovel. With the larger plants that are right next to the rock, I'll end up using the larger shovel. Part of the reason I want to show you this is you might have the same exact issue, and it might not be sea holly. It might be other little plants that have gone to seed. Those are free plants that you can take, you can pop out of the ground, and you can move them to somewhere else in your yard. For me, I have so many of this plant, and personally, I would rather take some of the larger plants and put those out in my yard. And with all these little babies, these are going to end up going to a new home. Or maybe in a year or two, they might end up back somewhere else in my yard. But I definitely don't want them where they are right now, which is just scattered all throughout this flower bed. It's funny, when it comes to a project like this, it's almost like a workout plan. You know, when you work out, you do 5 repetitions or 10 repetitions. We're going to do 5 plants a day. That's going to be my challenge. And this is not true for every single plant in my yard. This fitness plan will be for sea holly. 5 seedlings a day. Just trying to get as much of the root as I can. And it looks like it's basically 2 plants here. So what we can do is just go ahead and divide them just like that. Now that we've dug up our 5 sea holly seedlings, let's get them potted up. I'll come after you guys tomorrow. Okay, so I just have a mixture of used potting mix mixed with some topsoil from a previous project where I cleaned out an area. I just mix them together so that it's nice and well draining. And I just have these pots. They're a nice big size pot, which is perfect for potting up the sea holly due to their taproot. And I get my pots for free from a local garden center. At that garden center, there's a recycling area where people can drop off pots that they don't need anymore. So we're just going to take this and make sure that the roots are in there. And I also want to make sure that where the roots end and where the base of the plant is, that's flush with soil level. So I can go ahead and backfill. If I need to, I can always lift up the plant a little bit. This soil is pretty dry, so I'll have to make sure that I give my seedlings a good drink of water. And this one looks a little sad, but it will be fine. If you're like me and you sell plants or you have some sort of a backyard plant nursery, then you know that this time of year is very busy for us because we are getting plants ready for sale for next year. So in a way, having these plants that went to seed everywhere is a blessing in disguise. I ended up with free plants for my nursery. It gets tricky when you're trying to make a flower bed and you want it a little organized and not so weedy looking. You end up with all these little seedlings everywhere. It can make the bed look a little weedy or cluttered. But it's all good because now I have nice plants that I can sell for my nursery next year. I mean, that's a nice size plant that's going to be much larger next year. When I do projects in my garden, I really try to set realistic goals. And when it comes to like the sea holly, setting a goal of 5 sea holly plants a day is very realistic. Last year, I wanted to tackle this project. It was very overwhelming. And guess what? I didn't even tackle it at all. So many of the plants just got bigger over 1 year. So I thought really hard about how can I tackle this project where I'm going to feel a sense of accomplishment. And by just setting a realistic goal of digging 5 seedlings a day will make it a lot more manageable. When it came to today's project and the scope of the project, I also tried to just set a realistic goal of what was doable. I think that's really important when we think about our gardens. Try to come up with a plan and something that you think you can start and finish in 1 day. And if you don't finish it in 1 day, that's fine too. But I really do try to chunk my projects into small bite-sized morsels because doesn't it feel great if you actually accomplish those goals? And in that particular flower bed that we worked on, there are so many other things that I want to do in that area that I want to do this year. But those can wait for another day. What we got done today was awesome. It makes me feel good. And I'm really hoping that it motivated you too to look at a space in your garden and see what you can do to chunk out the work. Something realistic and just do it. Just do something small. And then you too will feel great when you get that job that you set out to do accomplished. And I'm just going to give the seedlings a nice drink of water. They're going to get placed in the shade for 2 or 3 days just so they can acclimate and then they can go out in my plant nursery. And that's a wrap for today's project. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this type of video, please hit the thumbs up button below. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Any questions or comments? I love hearing from you. Drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening. And the skies are looking ominous. And here's a fun fact about Vita Loca that you might not know. I am terrified of thunder and lightning. I always have been ever since I was a kid. So on that note, goodbye. I'm heading inside.